hell no.
John Fate.
Are we still live?
Field of 68 till I die.
I'm sorry, man. I blacked out.
Randolph Children.
DJ Khaled, you not a big DJ Khaled guy?
Hands thrown up and in.
Goodman needs to be fired all the time.
Josh Pastner.
You're going to beat people, straight up.
You know the deal.
They have no swag. They have no nothing.
Terrell McNeil.
From the bluest of the blue bloods to the smallest of the mid-majors.
This is Field of 68 after dark.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tuesday evening edition of the Field of 68 After Dark. My name is Rob Dauster. I have Jeff Goodman with me. We are live over on our YouTube channel. We are streaming over on Stadium. Make sure you guys go and download the Stadium app. We have a lot to get to. Goodman, a lot happened in the portal over the weekend. Gonzaga got themselves a scoring guard, one of the best scoring guards that was available in the portal. Virginia landed 3 guys out of the portal. Not 1, not 2, but 3 guys for Tony Bennett in the span of 2 days. We got another commitment to Arkansas. Another former Kentucky player is following his head coach there. And we're going to get into Baylor spoiling the party and going and getting maybe the best big man, one of the best big guys, one of the best 4s at least in the portal, and Norchad Omier committing. But I want to start with what I think is probably the second most impactful player to commit out of the portal.
Rowan Brumbaugh to Tulane? Is that
your guy, Rowan Brumbaugh, has committed to Tulane. He is going to really enjoy the lifestyle down there in New Orleans. It's a great food city. That's why everyone goes there, right? It's just nothing but the restaurants. It's the food. That's why they go to New Orleans. No, Alabama landed Cliff Omoruyi, the Rutgers transfer, for my money, the best defensive 5 in the portal and one of the best defensive 5s in college basketball last season. And with all of the guys that they got coming back, Grant Nelson, Latrell Wrightsell, Jaron Stevenson, potentially Mark Sears, and some of these pieces they got coming in, Chris Youngblood, Houston Millett, and Ada Holloway specifically, I do think that adding a guy that is an elite rim protector, that is a very, very good rebounder, and that is the one thing that this team that was a 4 seed that made the Final Four last year was missing. I think that this puts Alabama squarely, assuming they get Mark Sears back, and I don't know where he would be going necessarily. All due respect, Mark Sears. But if they get Mark Sears back, for my money, Alabama is right there with Kansas as the preseason number 1 team in all of college basketball. Is that crazy?
Not at all. Not at all. I think you can make a case Alabama or Kansas right now, preseason number 1 if Mark Sears comes back. And you probably would go Alabama. I mean, initially I was like, all right, they're clearly number 2. But, they went to the Final Four. They bring most of their team back if they bring Sears back, which I agree with you. I don't know where he goes because I don't think he's a first-round pick. But I guess, if he goes in the 30s or he gets intel that he could be picked in the 30s, he could certainly say, hey, you know what more is there that I could do in college basketball? But Sears, Holloway, Wrightsell. I love the kid Darion Reed coming in. I loved him when I saw him last summer on the AAU circuit. I think he's got a chance to be an absolute star, and they don't need that much from a guy like that. But, yeah, Big Cliff changes everything for this team because last year that was their Achilles heel, right? They didn't have a shot blocker. They didn't have a rim protector. They were atrocious defensively for most of the season, and now he can clean up a lot of those mistakes. Their perimeter can still be mediocre defensively, but again, with Big Cliff there, it erases a lot of the issues, a lot of the question marks that you have about this Alabama team, and they can score from every other spot.
Yeah, if you look at the numbers from last season, right, Alabama ranked 277th in defensive rebounding percentage. They ranked 296th in defensive turnover percentage, right? They ranked 201st in defensive 2-point field goal percentage. And all of those things can be fixed or at the very least impacted by putting a guy in and around the paint that is going to be able to, 1, block shots, and 2, erase mistakes when you get out and play aggressive and kind of jump passing lanes on the perimeter, right? So I think that bringing him in is going to be able to solve a lot of the ills that we saw on one of the best offenses in all of college basketball last season. You know that Alabama is going to be able to score. If they can get stops, if they go from being a team that has to win in the 90s to a team that can beat you in the 70s as well, I think that changes who they are. And, I tweeted this out on, when did he commit? On Sunday morning, right? And one of the things that I got back, and I'm curious your take on this, is why should we look at Alabama any differently than an FAU, than a North Carolina, than a team that made one of these deep tournament runs that we now overrate the next season because they got lucky for 2 or 3 weeks in the month of March? And my pushback would be FAU didn't change much, right? They didn't plug any of their holes. They just kind of ran it back. North Carolina didn't change much. They didn't really plug any of their holes. They ran it back and just ignored some of the issues that were already there on the roster. That's not what's happening with Alabama. If they get Mark Sears back, they plug the biggest hole that they had with Cliff Omoruyi. That's why I'm all the way in on Alabama heading into next season.
Totally different scenarios, right? Like FAU was kind of a one-year wonder at that point. North Carolina had been mediocre under Hubert Davis for much of his tenure, other than 1 month, right? They caught fire for 1 month of the NCAA tournament. Alabama's been really good under Nate Oates for pretty much the last four years. So I think the culture's there in Tuscaloosa. What Nate Oates has done is absolutely incredible to keep this thing going. And according to my sources, they're not like top 5 in NIL right now. They're not. I put out a tweet, and I stand by it, that I think there's really 3 programs right now that can get a dude in the portal when they're not the highest bidder. Basically, where they're I don't want to say they're underpaying, because again, sometimes they're beating out schools that they should be able to beat out, even paying less money. But I think it's UConn. Obviously, that's number one, with the fact that what Dan Hurley's done, winning 2 straight national titles. I think Alabama's 2, because of their offense, because of the way they play, because of the way kids want to play in that offense. Freedom, shooting threes, scoring a lot of points, getting to the NBA, putting players in the NBA right now for Nate Oates helps as well. And then I think Baylor's probably number 3. And a lot of people pushed back on me and said, like, well, they paid Norchad. Yeah, they paid him. All these schools are paying dudes. I'm not saying they're not paying. But again, are they paying as much as some of these other schools? They can still beat schools, good programs, with paying less money, NIL.
Yeah, well, we've heard that has happened with both UConn and Alabama very recently with some of the commitments that they have gotten. So I would agree with that. The Baylor one, let's talk about Baylor, because I think that this is really interesting. I think what Scott Drew has done developing his roster is he's found the sweet spot the same way that UConn is, and to a point the same way that Alabama has, where he's able to find the happy medium between bringing in freshmen, bringing in guys that you could develop over the years, bringing in transfers that are going to be there more than 1 year, and then also going out and getting some big names out of the portal that are going to be there for 1 or 2 years. Jeremy Roach, we discussed him a little bit earlier, the value of having an older point guard. They also landed Norchad Omier. And I think if you look at what this potential starting lineup is, a Jeremy Roach, Jaden Nunn, Langston Love, Norchad Omier, VJ Emcom with maybe Robert Wright coming off the bench. Like there's a little bit of an issue with depth at this point, and they probably want to be able to fill that out a little bit. But I think if you look at this Baylor roster, like that is a top 10 team with top 5 potential. And, if you look at the rest of the teams at the top of the Big 12, like all of a sudden there's like 4 teams that could win that league at the very top right now. And it would not shock me at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, Kansas, Iowa State, Houston, Baylor should all be in everybody's preseason top 10, period. And again, like you said with Scott Drew, part of it is you can get top 25 freshmen, right? If you're not getting top 25 freshmen, it's almost like, why are you taking freshmen? Just get a transfer. Get a transfer. They're going to be more impactful. But if you can get a top 25, maybe even a top 50 freshman, you roll the dice on that guy and think that, he's talented enough that he can make the adjustment quick enough and at least help you. He may not be a star, but look at Jacoby Walter last year. He came out of the gates. He was terrific. He had a really good freshman year. Yves Missy had a good year. Maybe not a great year, but a pretty darn good year. And you mix it, and I think the key, like you said, is like Jeremy Roach, a 5th-year guy who's won a ton of games at Duke and played a ton of games. Norchad, I would make the argument that I think Norchad might be as valuable as almost any transfer in the portal because of the intangibles, because of the toughness, because of the character. obviously he's a guy who's done at the highest level. I mean, he averaged 17 and 10 at Miami.
He's averaged a double-double all 4 years that he's been in college, which is a crazy
right.
thing to think about when you also factor in he's played in an Elite Eight and he played in the Final Four just 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's the one thing with Norchad to me is, again, he's a proven winner. He's a killer on the court. He's high character off the court. He fits Baylor and Scott Drew. That's the one thing they've been able to do that, I mean, think about it. What Scott Drew couldn't do when he got the job, obviously, was he had to roll the dice on players. Character, all of it. Like, he didn't know, like, couldn't. Now he doesn't have to. And that's what I'm saying. Like, he can get a Norchad for, less than market value, which, again, I can't believe I'm saying that because Norchad's making a ton of.
Yeah, you know what I think is really interesting about this entire conversation is one of the things that we heard over and over again as a reason why NIL should not come into existence. One of the issues with the potential of allowing players to get paid at the collegiate level is that you're going to find that the cream of the crop and the blue bloods and the biggest basketball schools are going to get anybody they want and every player that they want. And I think if you look at the three teams that you just mentioned that can get players that don't have to pay above market value to get them, right? Scott Drew and Baylor, Nate Oates in Alabama, Dan Hurley in Kentucky, Dan Hurley in UConn. All three of those guys were coaches that were courted pretty heavily and pretty publicly by the University of Kentucky when that job opened. And now all three of them are, I would say, biggest winners, close to biggest winners in the portal, close to biggest winners of the spring. And I just think it's really interesting how the exact opposite has happened, right? Well, the exact opposite has happened where we thought that the advent of NIL was going to be something where all of a sudden players are only going to go to the places that can pay the most and the blue bloods are going to be able to get any player they wanted. And the exact opposite has happened where Kentucky and North Carolina and Duke are kind of getting beat for guys and also are losing guys out of the program that maybe they didn't necessarily want to do. It's just, I think it's an interesting dynamic seeing what we were worried about versus what is actually happening now that NIL has come into existence.
Well, the other part of it is how many guys can you have before kids start looking at your roster and they're like, okay, yeah, you could have a salary cap of $6.5 million, which Arkansas could have right now. I don't know. But realistically, like, how many dudes can you bring in your roster before kids are starting to look at it and they say, like, well, I'm not going there. They already have 7 guys that I know are going to be in their top 7. Like, I'm not fighting for playing time. I'll go somewhere else and get paid maybe a little bit less or the same at that point because Arkansas doesn't have unlimited resources. And all these other schools, a lot of them have missed out. So they've got this bankroll now sitting around and they gotta get somebody. So, I think that's part of it too. As you go deeper into the portal season, you've got guys making decisions, looking at rosters where early on, let's face it, it was like a blank slate at Louisville, at Arkansas, at Kentucky, at USC, at all these places.
Yeah, I think the whole dynamic of the way that the transfer portal and the NIL has come together is just fascinating compared to what we were worried about. I do just want to hit real quick, North Carolina. They were one of the last 2, well, I guess the last 4 for Cliff Omoruyi. They didn't get him. Norchad is now committed to Baylor. There's still a void at the 5 spot. Are you worried about North Carolina? And we'll get more into rosters that we're worried about. But is there any concern with what this team kind of looks like in this current iteration right now?
I like Jalen Washington. I really like him. Like, I want to see him play more, and the kid's Aiden High. I haven't seen a lot of him, but I know Baycott loves him. So I don't know. I think Jalen Washington can play 25 minutes. I think you need a veteran now, maybe even to give you 15 quality minutes off the bench if you're Carolina and Hubert Davis.
Yeah, I think you need more bodies and more size and more strength, but they're kind of in the position where this is where it's going to have to be when you don't land the number 1 target that you want. Listen, we're going to take a break. On the other side, Khalif Battle commits to Gonzaga. Virginia has added 3 more pieces, and Arkansas lands another former Wildcat. That is coming up next. If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM Sportsbook. We're going to be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 throughout the year. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use bonus code FIELD, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. The best part, all you need to do is deposit and bet $10 of your own hard-earned money to be eligible. Here's how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using that bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. BetMGM is going to have some fun offers available throughout the NBA playoffs. Bet insurance tokens, odds boost, and what I love, a nice parlay booster too from time to time, as well as a ridiculous array of player prop bets for any sport that you could possibly imagine betting on. BetMGM is and always will be the king of the prop bet. So go download the BetMGM app, use the bonus code FIELD, and sign up today. And while I've got you, a quick request. The best way to support the Field of 68 content that you get for free is to engage with us. Rate and review the podcast. Like and share the YouTube videos. Tell your friends about us. It all helps in a world where the algorithm is king. And now, back to the show. Welcome back to the Tuesday evening edition of the Field of 68 After Dark. Goodman, I want to talk to you about two teams that we kind of wrote off this season. There were different points during the year where we had conversations about both Tony Bennett and Mark Few and whether or not these guys were going to be able to function in the NIL and transfer portal era. Tony Bennett landed 3 transfers over the weekend, and we're going to get to that in a second. But I want to start with Mark Few and Gonzaga coming off of a run to the Sweet 16. They're going to bring back pretty much everyone except for Anton Watson. Graham Ike is back. Ryan Nembhard is back. Nolan Hickman is back. Ben Gregg is back. Braden Huff is back. Dusty Schomer is back. Steele Venters is back. And Joe Few is back too, by the way. Just so you know, all 0.3 points per game off the bench for him. They've also added Michael Ajayi, who I believe is currently he's testing the waters. I think he's at the Combine. He might be a G League guy. I think he's at the Combine. And over the weekend, they landed a commitment from Khalif Battle, who is one of the best scoring guards that you are going to find in the portal. All of a sudden, I look at this Gonzaga roster, and they got a point guard, and they got a 5-man, and they got depth up front and guys that can space the floor. They got a shooter on the wing, and Nolan Hickman, who kind of figured it out. Steele Venters is going to get healthy. Michael Ajayi averaged 17 points a game in the WCC, and you got a Khalif Battle, a player in a Khalif Battle that can go out and win a game for you all by himself, one-on-one. All of a sudden, assuming they get Ajayi, I'm looking at this roster and I'm kind of talking myself into like, okay, we're talking about a top 10, maybe a top 5 team here.
I mean, yes and no. I just feel like, I don't know, we did this with Michigan State a couple years ago. They weren't, like top 5 preseason. They didn't add that much. We were all in. I feel like this is a similar look and feel to him a little bit. I like Ajayi a lot, and if he comes in, I think he'll make an impact. But, are some of these guys going to get that much better? Are they going to make a huge jump? Hickman made a pretty good jump. He got better for sure. Nembhard's a veteran. We know what he can do. Graham Ike is kind of what he is, although he came back from an injury-prone year the year before to have a solid season last year. I don't know, Rob. Like, here's what I'm doing as we're talking here. I'm going through the record of Khalif Battle since he's been 5 years in school. I believe it's last year he was at Arkansas. The previous 3, he was at Temple, correct? And then I think he started his career at Butler. And yeah, he has not had a great 5-year career record. So listen, he's fine. He's fine as a piece. If that's what you've made it clear, if you're Mark Few, you're coming in and you're coming off the bench and you're going to give us 15, 18 minutes off the bench. I just hope Khalif Battle's not coming in thinking like, I'm going to be a dude. Because yeah, you've been a dude at places, but again, and this is kind of one of my issues. And I'm not singling out Khalif Battle for this, but I am saying like some of these guys who are getting paid good money, and they've been at 3-4 spots and they haven't won a lot of games. It's almost like, what are we doing here? Like, aren't we prioritizing at some point? Are we going to prioritize winning? And I just wonder, like, Mark Few on this one, does he need Khalif Battle that much? Probably not. You think he does?
I think he does. I think getting Michael Ajayi is going to be a little bit more important because they need, like losing Watson, they need that kind of like big wing, that guy that can allow them to play. I don't want to say 4 out because I think Ajayi is like the 3-4 kind of a hybrid. But I do think that bringing in a guy like that can just go get you a bucket. Like we saw what Rasir Bolton did for him, right? And Rasir Bolton was a guy that before he ended up at Gonzaga wasn't necessarily the biggest winner that we've ever seen. Like we've seen Mark Few be able to bring players in. Andrew Nemhard, was he classified as a winner before he got to Gonzaga? And I know it's a little bit of a different comparison.
Didn't he go to the Elite Eight at Creighton?
Andrew Nemhard. Not Ryan.
I thought you meant
Andrew
Ryan.
Nemhard.
Yeah,
Andrew
Nemhard. No, you're right about that one. He was kind of
I do think that.
Florida.
I do think that you can bring in a player that is not necessarily the best winner and put him into a culture that will allow them to be able to win, right? Especially if that conversation has happened. And I would believe that if Mark Few is going to get a guy like Khalif Battle, that conversation has probably happened. At least that's kind of what I would assume. I want to get to Virginia as well before we kind of spend an entire segment on just Gonzaga, because Virginia went out and they landed 3 guys, right? They landed Elijah Saunders, a transfer from San Diego State. They landed Jalen Borley, a backcourt transfer from Florida State. And they went out and they got who I would say is probably your favorite player in the history of the sport of basketball, not just college basketball, the history of basketball, when TJ Power, a former five-star recruit that was a freshman at Duke last season. And you add that group to Andrew Rhodey coming back, to Isaac McNeely coming back, and you kind of look at this roster and you can squint, and there's a lot of interesting pieces here. I, for one, am big on Christian Bliss. I saw him play last year at Peach Jam, and he redshirted this past season for Virginia. He strikes me as the kind of program piece that Tony Bennett has had so much success with. And you bring in these 2 versatile wings, right? And you bring in a guard that can play in the backcourt, and all of a sudden you put all this stuff together, and I can squint my eyes and I can see a top 25 team here at Virginia. And I understand there's going to be a lot of development that needs to happen there. But I think that bringing in a little bit of talent, a guy that can score and power, a guy that can guard in Elijah Saunders, and a point guard or a backcourt piece in Jalen Worley, I think there's a lot to be bullish on here if you are a Virginia Cavaliers fan.
Yeah, I mean, listen, again, I think Virginia is going to be interesting this year, just because if Tony Bennett doesn't win this year, does he eventually get frustrated enough to say, I'm done? We've talked about this for the last year. TJ Power, I don't know how he fits in that system. Like offensively, I just don't know if that's the best fit for TJ Power personally. I think he's better getting up and down. I think we saw that in AAU ball, and getting him with the ball in his hands. He could play in the half court, but I think he's really good with the ball in his hands, pushing it, making decisions. Yeah, 2 summers ago, he did look like a pro, and his confidence was shot this past year at Duke. And Tony Bennett's that's gonna be the number 1 priority for Tony Bennett. If he could turn TJ Power into the type of player we thought he was going to be, or I thought he was going to be, then yeah, you're in business. But if TJ Power is just another player, like I think you got a lot of just another players at Virginia. And again, I never count out Tony Bennett. I never count him out in the regular season of the ACC because he's a proven winner. But when it comes to the NCAA tournament, they just haven't done anything in a while, and you just wonder whether it's just going to be more of the same.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that this is going to be a team that does what the 2019 team did and win a national championship, but I do think that this is going to be a team that will be pretty good. And I like the pieces that they brought in. And at the end of the day, like if Tony Bennett was able to to do what he did with last year's roster and get them to the tournament. And we all saw what happened in the playing game of that tournament. If he can do that with last year's roster, and now you're giving him the pieces that he has here, I'm just buying it. And I will say the one thing I'm not buying, and you tell me if I'm crazy here. I love Janelle Davis, right? I love Nelly Davis. And I think that adding Jonas Adu is really important to add a 5-man that is a veteran to a roster that's going to have a whole bunch of freshmen on it, right? But seeing that Adut Thoreau is now following Cal to Arkansas, and seeing that DJ Wagner is now taking a visit to Arkansas, and seeing that Cal is basically trying to reproduce the way that he built a roster at Arkansas with Kentucky players, like I just find myself questioning whether or not this whole like Cal has something to prove, and he's old Cal, he's 2009 Cal, this is John Wall Cal that we're going to end up seeing. I just don't know if that's going to be a thing. Like I feel like at some point, you got like the old dog's got to learn a new trick, right?
I disagree. I actually disagree. I think this is the way you put your first team together if you're Cal. Okay. I'm not saying it's the way to put every team together, but again, I think if you're going to go in and take 13 new guys or 11 new guys and throw them together and you're at a new spot, that is a recipe for not going deep in the NCAA tournament. Period. Like I don't think it works. You know, you're bringing in 3 freshmen. What do you want? You want him to bring in 7 transfers that he's never coached and expect them to be able to mesh it together? I like this. I like bringing in. So is it Little Z or Big Z now? What are we calling him? Because his older brother is going to Illinois now. So he's Little Z. He's Little Z.
No, he's Big Z. His brother's name doesn't start with a Z. Yeah, so we got Big T and Big Z. Okay. Yeah. Right. You need to do your homework. This is what happens. This is what happens when we bring on Jeff Goodman, who doesn't do his research, who has spent the entire night having a tang party over here. This is what happens when we allow Jeff Goodman on the show.
Here's what I'll say. Again, I like the 3 freshmen. I'm fine with. I'm fine with it. I'm so glad he didn't take 5 or 6 of his freshmen with him. And he might not have had that opportunity anyway. That might have not been his decision. That might have been, some of those other guys' decision not to go with him. But he gets 3 freshmen. He brings in Adu and Janelle Davis, 2 guys that are veterans that have produced at other places. And I've told you, I think Janelle is perfect for Calipari. Perfect. Because, again, he's not the easiest dude to coach. We know that. But Calipari has dealt with far more difficult players to coach than Nelly Davis. So that'll be easy for him. Big Z, Little Z.
One day I need Trevor to go out and just put together a compilation of you saying Janelle Davis is not the easiest player to coach, because I think you've said it in like 17 straight shows.
But we also know how much I love that. Who loves Nelly Davis more than I love Nelly Davis? And I like the fact that in a way he's got some shit to him. Right? I love that. That's what makes him Nelly Davis. That's what makes him great, in my opinion. That's what, to me, is going to give Arkansas a chance next year, because you can give him the ball. How many guys are there that, Rob, you can give him the ball and say, hey, you know what? Go get us one. Go get us one, and you feel good about him being able to get you a bucket. Not many.
I mean, there's not many. The only pushback that I would have is that he's not exactly known as a guy that brings in freshmen to keep them around, right? Like, he's not someone that's trying to develop a team by having a player on campus for 2 to 3 years. Like, you look at I'll go back to UConn again, right? And they bring in these guys, and Steph Castle aside, you're getting like 2, maybe 3 years out of them. And when they leave, they're going to be ready to go play in the NBA. Whereas Cal has in the past used Kentucky as the stopping point for one and dones. And when you bring in these freshmen,
a better coach, but Dan Hurley's a really good coach.
But what I'm saying is that you're going to be relying on freshmen in these major roles where there's going to be a certain level of expectation. When, let's just face it, like Boogie Fland is a talented point guard, right? He is not Cooper Flagg. Carter Knox can get a bucket. He is not Cooper Flagg. Kadary Richmond is a good player. He's from up my way, up here in New Jersey, but he's not Cooper Flagg. Like, so I wonder if the impact that they're going to have is going to be in line with the expectation that people are going to have because of the reputation Cal has for the freshmen that he brings in. So, like, look, I think Nelly Davis and Jonas Adu are perfect linchpins for a roster, right? I think adding a Adu Thoreau as like your 6th or 7th guy to be a rotation piece, a big athletic wing, he's switchable, he can play the 4, he can guard 2s. Love that. When you're filling those holes with freshmen that are, let's just face it, they're going to look like freshmen next year. They're not going to look like guys that are ready to play in the NBA. I'm a little bit worried about that.
You know what I'm worried? I'm worried they don't have a veteran point guard right now. That's what I'm worried about more than anything. Is Nelly Davis is more of a guy to be able to play off the ball than with the ball all the time. So if you go in DJ Wagner, Nelly Davis, you got Adu, you got Thiero, who I thought was a great pickup for them. Absolutely terrific pickup because, as I said, I don't know what Cal's system is, but Thiero knows it at least. And then you've got Z up front. Like your freshmen aren't going to be counted upon as much. They're just not. But again, to me, I don't know if like Wagner, if they get him with Nelly Davis, is the perfect backcourt for me, the way they play together.
Yeah, I'd be worried about that backcourt as well. But listen, you were joined by new BYU head coach Kevin Young. So on the other side of this break, we're going to hear from him and whether or not he has as good a taste in Mexican food as his brother Justin Young does. That's after the break.
Whether you are a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all understand the importance of mental and physical well-being and proper recovery for top-notch performance. After a 6-month season loaded with cross-country travel, I can promise you that proper recovery is a priority for me these days. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of The Field of 68. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or the EE system. If you haven't heard of the EE system yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New Jersey or at one of the hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. If you're interested in experiencing the EE system technology for yourself, go to unifiedhealing.com/unified68 to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/UNIFYD, the number 6, the number 8. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment and before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, including the EE system.
All right, now pleased to introduce the new BYU head coach, none other than Kevin Young. And all right, Kevin, full disclosure, I don't know if you and I have ever met before. I'm not sure if we met, but we have a very common friend. For you, it's a brother, Justin Young, who I've known for 20 plus years. We kind of got in the industry at the same time, covering recruiting. Have we met or no? Do we know this?
I think we might have met somewhere along the way. I can't remember when, so we'll call this the first time.
We'll call it the first time. There you go. Congrats. You've been in the NBA for a while, kind of working your way up there, and decided, and I don't know if you need to get your sanity checked or not, but you decided to get in the college game when a lot of people are going the other way. A lot of people are saying, you know what? I don't know if I can handle this thing. Now, I think most of the people that are saying that are probably my age or your brother's age. You're only in your I think you're like 42, right?
Correct.
All right. So you got more energy for this. And frankly, I think the NBA game probably has prepared you for the craziness that is going on right now with college athletics and the portal and NIL and all that. What's it been like so far? And I know it's only been a few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly just been, I feel like I'm learning something new every 5 minutes as I go through it. I mean, first matter of business was hiring some staffers who are very well versed in the college atmosphere, but the more I'm doing it, the more I'm realizing how many similarities there are to both the NBA and the G League when I was doing that for a number of years in terms of, the types of people that you're talking to on the phone to get information, to get things done. So there's a lot of similarities there.
So take me through first your path, because I don't think a lot of people in college know much about you because you really weren't in college.
Yeah.
I think, did you do a year like Utah Valley years ago when you
Yep,
started?
yep. I did. So my very first gig was at a JUCO, actually. I did that for a year, then made my way out to Utah Valley, worked for Dick Hunsaker for a year, and then that was really my only college experience. I jumped onto the pro side quickly after that. I was a head coach in Ireland, of all places, for a year, then came back into the G League, where I spent 9 years, was a head coach of 3 different G League teams, and made my way to the Sixers. Was with Brett Brown and that crew for 4 years. That's where me and Monty Williams linked up, and he's the one that brought me out to Phoenix, and then I just finished up my 4th year out there. So that's a quick version of it.
Love Brett Brown, one of my favorite
Yeah.
people. One of my favorite people.
Guy.
Another New Englander. I'm a New Englander, so he's from up here in Maine. So so take me through the decision, because one of the things with you is, listen, you turned down an NBA head coaching job right before you took the BYU head coaching job. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but the Nets job was yours if you wanted it. And you said, hey, you know what? I would rather get into college and coach at BYU. Why?
Yep. So full disclosure, they never actually offered me the job. Things were very, very close. Sean was fantastic. Those guys were great. But yeah, no, it was something me and my wife, honestly, we had in the back of our mind for years. This particular is the only job in college that I would have made the move for, just given the uniqueness of the university. My wife went to school here. We met. I was coaching in the G League when she was a student out here. And so, we have family out here. Again, the unique nature of the school and the recruiting pool was something that I felt like if I did go this route, this was this place for us. And, as we were just comparing different things relative to the NBA lifestyle, I have 3 small kids. The NBA life is very difficult from a family standpoint. Not that the college, the conclusion we came to was it's busy, but at least I'm at home a lot more, even though I likely be more busy. I talked to a consultant with Mark Madsen, who's a good friend, who was in the NBA. He's obviously at Cal. Billy Lang, who's a good friend, worked together with the Sixers. And so those 2 guys in particular had a lot of good reference points as it relates to the difference between family life in the NBA, family life in college. And that was a big factor in why we decided to go this route.
What's the biggest thing that you've kind of learned that you'll like? I guess, how do you describe your coaching style, even? Because I don't think a lot of people know. Again, you're in the G League, you got head coaching experience for a while there. You've learned under some of the really, best coaches, obviously, in the NBA. How do you describe, number one, kind of your personality? Now, I tried to get, in full disclosure again, I tried to get Justin to give me some good dirt on you. And he went to the brothers group chat, I'm told, and didn't even get anything good. That you're that squeaky clean. How do you describe your personality, number one, and then your coaching style?
Yeah, I think personality is just pretty much a straight shooter, pretty direct, just kind of say it how it is. That's kind of how I was able to sort of earn my stripes in the league with a lot. I mean, I was really lucky in the NBA world where I coached a lot of elite players, a lot of all-stars, Hall of Famers. And I don't know, my way of connecting with them was just kind of being honest with them. And that was how I kind of gained a lot of those guys' respect. So that's my general approach. Not a lot of fluff, but communicative, relationship-driven, things of that nature. In terms of the basketball style, I've always been an offensive mind. I would say that's kind of been the tasks I've had in the NBA. I like to play fast. I like to play an up-tempo, 5-out style, kind of a modern NBA type of vibe. And like probably my best years doing that was constructed around a rim rolling big with a good point guard and shooters around that. And so that's kind of the genesis of how I like to play. A lot of, I was with Brett Brown, as I mentioned, for a long time and was kind of grew up with a lot of the Spurs philosophy, I think, in terms of making quick decisions with the basketball and that kind of thing. And then that morphed its way into my own specific philosophies. But that's kind of a 30-second overview of it, I would say.
Did you know Mark Pope at all? Like, have you talked to him? Obviously, they had a great year last year and played a style that was, they shot a ton of threes. It was almost like, watching an NBA team to some degree. Obviously, they didn't have that rim running big that you're talking about, but they had a lot of shooters, a lot of skilled players. Have you talked to him at all? I assume you're trying to get as much info as you can on the job, the college game, and while trying to navigate the portal.
Yeah. No, I mean, Mark and I know each other. I did a clinic out here some years ago when he first got the job. We connected then, but don't know him well. Knew a couple of the guys that were on staff who I picked their brains and so forth. Hired Chris Burgess, who had been an assistant here a couple years ago, was up at Utah. So his familiarity with a lot of our players still, and obviously the school in general has been very helpful. So, yeah, man, it's important to learn from what they've done, what we can add to that group to supplement some of the guys that are coming back. But fortunate that a lot of the Dallin and Richie decided to come back out of the portal and play for us. That was big. So we'll be able to rely on the experience that those guys bring to the table from last year.
What describe like a day of what it's been like so far for you? I mean, are you getting any sleep? Are you on the phone the whole time? Obviously, some coaches are flying out to meet with kids on their campuses. Other coaches are bringing kids in for visits on their own campus. What's kind of the overall, because it's so different for me, even to cover right now, because it's changed. For you, it's not different. This is all you've known so far in college.
Yeah. I think that is an advantage for me. I don't know the old way, so to speak. Like I keep telling like our administration, it's basically the NBA. It's free agency. So a lot of the systems that I'm trying to implement moving forward are very NBA-like, because I just see so many parallels between the NBA world and this, relative to like personnel, mainly databases and so forth, information, intel, all that kind of stuff. But in terms of like what a day looks like, I mean, the tricky part early on was I was doing both. I was doing the Suns, which obviously we were in a playoff run, and then doing this as well. And so it was go to Suns, come back, get to we were on the road to start. I was just in the hotel on the phone for 12 straight hours, burning the lines up, trying to hire staff, talk to recruits, talk to agents, all different things of that nature. So even snuck in a quick, after game one, we had a 2-day break. We had practice. So went to practice, snuck into a quick flight, came to Provo for like 6 hours to get a couple of things done, and then flew back for game two. So Suns were great in terms of letting me get my son's work done and do this in between. But now that the Suns season is over, been able to dive in Provo now. I'm kind of still going back and forth a little bit from Phoenix, but yeah, man, every day it's just going on a list of staffing and player retention and not retention anymore, but portaling, as you would say, are the big tasks at hand.
Listen, appreciate you taking the time. I know you got more calls to make, probably a whole lot more important than talking to me on a Zoom right now. So, Kevin, appreciate it, man. And I'm sure I'll see you in July.
It's time to talk about Vaulted. Vaulted is an app that allows you to store your predictions now and forever. It also allows you to challenge your friends to prove that your takes are, in fact, smarter than theirs. But what makes Vaulted great is that it allows you to keep all the receipts that you need to prove that your friends are not as smart as they think they are. With that in mind, let's roll through the 5 worst Vaulted predictions that were made on the field of 68 after dark this season. On November 6th, Jeff Goodman predicted that St. Mary's would make it back to the Final Four. they lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament. On November 29th, it was predicted that Arkansas would win the SEC. They finished 12th out of 14 teams. That prediction was made by Jeff Goodman. On December 28th, it was predicted that Memphis would make it to the Final Four. They did not make the NCAA tournament. That prediction was made by Jeff Goodman. On December 13th, it was predicted that Michigan State would win the Big Ten. They finished in 6th place. That prediction was made by Jeff Goodman. On December 29th, it was predicted that Miami would return to the Final Four this season. They finished 14th out of 15 teams in the ACC. That prediction was made by Jeff Goodman. So download the Vaulted app that's spelled VLTED from the App Store now and start keeping all of those receipts.
Welcome back to the Tuesday evening edition of the Field of 68 After Dark, where we're going to discuss some news that broke on Tuesday afternoon. Kadary Richmond, a guy that many think is one of the top 3, if not the number 1 player that entered the transfer portal this year, is going to be staying in the Big East. The team that lured him out of Seton Hall has landed his commitment at St. John's. Rick Pitino has got the man that he was looking for. You combine Kadary Richmond's commitment with David Smith, who committed over the weekend, and all of a sudden, the Johnnies have a very, very intriguing backcourt. Jeff Goodman, what do you make of Richmond's commitment to St. John's? What does this mean for Rick Pitino's team, and how good could that backcourt be between him and Smith? You might have 2 guys that can get a triple-double every single night in that backcourt.
So I think now St. John's becomes a team that's somewhere in the 10 to 25 range with Kadary Richmond and Davon Smith. And they're not overpowering up front. Certainly they missed on a couple of their big men targets, Norchad, Omier being the main one. You know, they
the 2 guys we talked about at
goal.
the top of the show were both heavily linked with St. John's when they decided to enter the portal.
So now they're going to be more guard heavy, which is kind of what you want to be. But they've got enough in the backcourt. RJ Luis is going to take a jump. He was hurt last year. He's talented. We know that. The big question mark is Zuby and Vince up front. Are they good enough as a tandem to give you, I don't know, Rob, can they give you 15 and 8 up front between the 2 of them, 40 minutes? I don't know, but I like, listen, the talent level of this team went up significantly from a year ago. And again, I don't think they're a top 10 preseason team, but I think they're that next tier. And if you're a St. John's fan, and I know, listen, we put a high expectation on them in year 1, probably unjust for Rick Pitino and the Johnnies. But in year 2, if they can be a team that's in the top 25 most of the year and win a game in the tournament, maybe win 2 and get to the second weekend, that's momentum. That's a hell of a season. That's relevance for St. John's this year.
Yeah, I think that the combination, well, first of all, I think that Kadary Richmond is the absolutely perfect kind of guard that you can put in a Rick Pitino system because of his length, because of his versatility. You could use him as one of the 2 at the top of the 2-2-1 press that they run. You could use him as a wing if you want to play him next to RJ Luis, the 3 and the 4, and play a couple of smaller guards, and you can do that. I think that the versatility that you get out of David Smith and Kadary Richmond is something that you're not going to be able to find elsewhere. I think RJ Luis is a guy that's going to end up being a star this year. You look at Rick Pitino's best teams, and there's always like a big athletic wing on there that can be versatile, that can be switchable. I really like how this roster has come together at the 1 through 4 spots. You hit the nail on the head when it comes to the 5. Like Vince Chukwu is a guy that was at one time a 5-star prospect before he had the heart issue at USC. Hasn't quite reached back to that level. We'll see if it happens again. Zuby is the transfer from Kansas. He's not exactly the size of somebody like a Joel Soriano. I think he's like 6'8". So that's a little bit of a concern. But I mean, Simeon Wilcher and Brady Dunlap are 2 guys that can find what places and find roles on the wing for Rick Pitino in the system. The biggest thing the biggest question that I'm going to have, specifically with Kadary, is there was always a motivational aspect of it that we heard early on in the Seton Hall tenure, some of the issues that he had at Syracuse. Like, if you're not willing to get out there and put in the effort for Rick Pitino, like, it's not going to work, and I think he got much better by the end of his tenure at Seton Hall. I think that you can hear the way that Shaheen spoke about him to know that was the way that he was viewed. But that's going to be the biggest thing, because the way that Pitino, like, what he does defensively, you're going to have to put in not just work on the practice floor, but you're going to have to put in work in the film room. You're going to have to learn about the way that they run their defense. Like, what they do is just so different than what anybody else does that it's it can sometimes confuse the guys on the own roster.
I've been told by several people, Kadary Richmond does not exactly love practice. And what is Rick Pitino like more than anything else, Rob?
Practice.
So this thing is going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. And I do think if I'm St. John's and Rick Pitino, I got to get a stretch four. I got to get a four who can shoot it, because to me, I just don't know if there are enough. Again, Brady Dunlap when he comes on the court, but I don't know how much he's going to be able to play. Davon Smith can make shots. Kadary's not a great shooter. RJ Lewis isn't a proven shooter yet. The 2 5 men, I don't know. So I think you have to have a 4-man who can stretch it right now. And I think it's going to be a pivotal addition, whoever that they get through the portal for that 4-man spot for St. John's.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who they kind of fill in that gap with. But I'm in it, man. I like that addition, and I think that if you're looking at if you're looking at it through red storm tinted glasses, that is a very good addition for the Johnnies, and something where, like, after missing on 2 of their biggest targets, they had to get done. Which leads me into the next conversation that I want to have with you, because we heard a lot about the war chest that St. John's was going to have available to them in the transfer portal. And I think to a point they've been able to fairly successfully get it done. They didn't get Cliff and they didn't get Norchad, but if you're going to tell me that you can land David Smith and Kadary Richmond out of the portal, I'm going to go ahead and say that you had a pretty good portal season, right? It's hard for me to be too negative on those 2 additions. But you look at someone like a Georgetown, who we heard so much about, who was unable to kind of put together the transfer class that maybe we necessarily expected. You look at a program like Villanova, who looks like they're going to lose not only Justin Moore and Eric Dixon, but Mark Armstrong has said that he's going to keep his name in the NBA draft and will not be coming back to school. You look at a program like a Syracuse, like an Arizona, like a Tennessee. Like, what are these rosters that you're looking at now and you're saying to yourself, man, I don't know how they're going to be able to live up to the expectation that maybe their fan base has here. For me, Georgetown is number 1 on that list.
Villanova is number 1. Because Georgetown, at least, yes, Ed Cooley, I thought he'd have more right now, because obviously they've got money, but you knew they were going to have to overpay because they've been so bad for so long. And any kid that's looking at Georgetown right now, like, they look at Georgetown differently than we do. Like, they've had no success really to speak of in the last 10 years. So these kids think Georgetown is a terrible program, and it really hasn't been very good for a long period of time. Poverty program. Villanova, to me, Villanova's roster, you look at it and you're like, what the hell happened? Well, I guess what the hell happened was they had $3 million last year and they did nothing with it. And this is the scenario that's been brought up many times, is if you've got all this money and you're asking these boosters for money, you better deliver. Because if you don't, those same boosters are going to be like, I'm done with you. And you look at this roster right now, and it is underwhelming. It looks like a roster, Rob, in which the money people said, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not giving you anything else. We did this a year ago, and it failed, and we didn't get to the NCAA tournament with all these dudes. And, yeah, I'm out. I mean, look at it. Like, I like Max Shoga a lot. Like, he may be your best player. He's probably your number 1 option right now. The VCU transfer came from Utah State. Really nice player, but like Tyler Perkins coming from Penn. LaSalle, you beat out South Carolina for the Brickus kid. Jordan Longino's back, and it's a roster that honestly looks like an A-10 roster right now, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the wildest part about that to me is one of the most fun teams in the NBA is literally called the Nova Knicks, right? It's literally an organization that has built their identity around three guys that won championships at Villanova, right? We saw on national television on TNT, Jalen Brunson go on there and talk shit to Kenny Smith about the banner that Villanova has for beating North Carolina in the rafters when he won a game on the road at Philadelphia, right, in the Wells Fargo Center. And the idea that a team literally called the Nova Knicks can't find that success in college or can't utilize that in a way to be able to get transfers and to get high school players and to get college basketball
Right was
players.
pretty good.
Yeah, well, I know.
Right
it's just it's wild that is what's happening right now with this program. And I don't know how they're going to be able to compete they're not going to be able to compete in the Big East. Syracuse, Arizona, Tennessee, like I think it's a little bit of a different we're talking about different degrees of concern when it comes to those programs, but like Arizona, if they don't get Caleb Love back, there's some things going on there. Like Tennessee, I don't know how you lose a star in Dalton Connect and a couple of program guys like a Jonas Adu, like a Josiah Jordan-James, like a Santi Vescovi, and expect to be able to stay at the same level that you were at before. That's going to be a tough one for me to buy into this season.
I think Syracuse is really intriguing, right? In year two of the Red Autry era, they lose Judah Mintz. J.J. Starling's got to step up. They get Jair Davis from Delaware, Eddie Lampkin, a veteran big who's solid, but their roster looks okay. It looks okay. One I'll give you that, like, I think this is it. Like Leonard Hamilton at Florida State. His roster looks just about as ordinary. And remember, wasn't that long ago? How many years ago was it that Leonard had this thing rolling? And they've completely bottomed out right now. And I got to figure this is probably it for Leonard Hamilton. And I really would like him to go out the right way, but I'm not sure I see that happening.
Yeah, it's really throwing me off right now as I'm scrolling through ACC rosters and I see the Cal Golden Bears right next to the Boston College Eagles. Like, what are we doing here? I totally forgot that we're going to have two Pac-12 teams in the ACC next season.
You're excited, aren't you?
Oh man, it's playing the game of trying to figure out who's in what conference as this season gets going on it's just gonna be ridiculous. We also got to make sure that every single time Boston College is like playing at Cal or Cal is playing at Boston College on like a noontime tip on the ACC network, you got to fade the road team like crazy. Asking these college kids to take 6-hour road trips. BetMGM, I'm going to be taking a lot of your money this year, even more money than I took in March this past season. But Jeff, listen, we are here every Tuesday night and every Thursday night at 9 p.m., 9 until 10 p.m., live on YouTube, live over on the Stadium app. We're going to be doing After Dark 2 times a week until the end of the NBA draft season. Make sure you tune in with us. We're going to have another live mock draft too. That's happening in about 4 or 5 weeks. We're still putting together the roster.
I don't want the number one pick. I don't want to be fired. I don't want the number one pick this year. Okay. Don't give it to me.
I had a conversation with a couple people that might be rumored to be going number one. And I was like, you don't want it. You don't want to go first in this year's draft because all you're going to do is spend your entire career getting compared to the likes of Anthony Bennett and the likes of Andrea Bargnani and some of these other number one and Greg Oden and some of these other number ones that didn't pan out in years where there was no number one pick. So I would be hoping that I would not get picked number one in this draft if I was getting drafted. Let me get picked number 5. No one calls the number 5 pick in the draft a bust, and you're still going to go out there and make like $9 million a year. So that's where I'm at with it. But listen, anyway, we have a lot of content coming up. Off the carousel has just started. Our NBA draft profiles are starting here in the next couple of weeks. So make sure you keep it locked on the Field of 68, and we'll be here live every Tuesday and Thursday for the next 6 weeks at 9 p.m. For Jeff Goodman, for our producer, Trevor Lease, my name is Rob Dauster. We'll see you guys again Thursday night.